welcome everybody from our getting ready and getting prepped up for going virtual Dragon Con. We are going to be live here for the next hour, and we're going to be talking about Season 2 of Doom Patrol, and I'm going to pass it off to David Speakman, our moderator.
Okay, yeah, so this is going to be the basic theme of this is a recap of the season that happened and putting into context for the season, the first season. So we're going to start with where they left off and where they brought us through as we ended on the first season. But before we start that, let's introduce ourselves. I'll call out your name because it's hard. We can't go left to right here because people are kind of in random order almost. So I'll talk about myself first. My name is David Speakman. I have been on panels for, 20 years with Dragon Con, and I am currently a CEO of a game company called Double Critical, and it's completely irrelevant to this thing, but if you want to know more about me, I'll be on the Dragon Con American Sci-Fi Fantasy Media Facebook page, and you can click on and find me there. Let's go on to Andrea next.
Hi, I'm Andy, and this is actually my 16th Dragon Con. I've been on a bunch of panels for the American Sci-Fi Fantasy Media track, as well as I do IT and content help over with the alternate history track as well, the alternate and historical fiction track now, and a couple of other tracks. So yeah, you can pretty much find me all over the place, usually on Dragon Con, and I'm just a fan, and I just like to talk about my favorite shows, so that's why I'm here.
And on to Henry.
Yes, I'm Henry Hanks, and I'm almost as many as David. I have, I think I count that this will be my 19th Dragon Con technically, and I've been doing panels for almost all those years, and a big fan of Doom Patrol, of course, one of the more creative shows, weirdest shows on TV. Oh, and I should mention I'm coming out with a podcast soon called What the Nerd, and so look out for that.
And now Mark's.
Hey, I'm Mark's Pyle. This will be my third Dragon Con on this side of the table, but I've gone off and on for many years as just a fan, and I love Dragon Con. I'm a co-host of a podcast called Genre Entertainment, where we interview different actors and directors and writers and such. I'm an indie filmmaker, and I'm arts, and about ready to finish that up with my new urban fantasy series. I hope it have come out next year. So, and I love Doom Patrol. I love it, the comic books originally, and I love this show. So.
And of course, we have Kelly, who I wrangled in last minute to join us, even though she was just going to be the track leader.
So obviously, I'm Kelly Harkins. I'm the director of the track, and been a big fan of Doom Patrol. I won't say how many years I've been going to Dragon Con, but I think this is my 10th year as director for the track. Oof, geez. So,
yeah, we all started going as children, right? That's
absolutely.
Little toddlers.
Henry, in a couple more years, you're going to have gray hair like this. And so it's going to happen. So watch out. So getting on to the topic of the show. So Doom Patrol was one of the marquee properties that when it first was developed by the DC Universe streaming service, which is kind of in process of closing down in favor of HBO Max. This year, it switched over. Now they just say it's a Max original. They don't even mention the DC Universe at all on this show, and which was kind of interesting. And then also, since it switched over to a format that a lot more people have access to, actually more people are watching it this year, which is kind of nice. A lot of people just saw it as one big series so they see it as both first year and second year together, the first season and second season together, which is pretty amazing. But at the end of last season, we were left with our group of heroes who were, most of them got the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids treatment, and they were small. They introduced a new character who we never saw her face. And then there's this kind of a major big bad was stuck into painting. And so let's start with who would like to talk about what their anticipation was for the season and how it played out in the first episode. Anybody? I'll call on people.
So you're saying what our expectations were going into season 2?
Walking into the first episode, and then what happened when the first episode arrived, and we actually saw the face of the new character who was introduced.
So this is like a spoiler-free zone for season 2, right? Like we can talk about. I don't want to ruin it. If you're watching this, I'm assuming that you've seen all or most of season 2.
Or you understand you're going to get spoiled.
It would be hard to do a recap of a season without spoiling it. So if you haven't seen the season, bookmark this YouTube channel, watch the 9 episodes, then come back.
Exactly.
So,
my expectation was that they would go somewhere they would do something with Mr. Nobody. And I guess that didn't happen because of actor availability. I think that's why they sort of snuck in the beard eater, who is by far the grossest character I have ever run into in any comic book show ever. Like I had to watch those parts with my fingers. I couldn't even unmute it. It was the grossest. But I guess that's why they had him kind of not taking over, but kind of being the sidekick that could at least pick up the Mr. Nobody dimension story. Because I think Alan Tudyk just wasn't available.
I love the breaking the fourth wall mention where they say he got a voice acting gig on an anime series, which is Harley Quinn. He's Joker. So he just wasn't available. I think that's why there was a lot of things that I read about that they were planning to do this season that they couldn't for all kinds of external reasons, which I'm going to let David get into that later. But I think that might have been one of them. So I felt like the Mr. Nobody story kind of petered out. That was for me. I was expecting them to just go somewhere with it and just not let him sort of just stay there floating.
Right, especially since in the last episode, they really pulled in onto the painting that had both the beard eater and Mr. Nobody there, and it was like dun dun dun, the end ? And so it was kind of, we were led into believing that Mr. Nobody was going to be somebody in the season, but Mr. Nobody was a Mr. No Show for the entire season, and it had to do with contractual issues, but also they could have at least showed his image, which they didn't really do. But I guess they cut some corners there. But what's going on with that? Henry, probably more about the DC universe than any person I know. What were your thoughts about when you approached and you the season first started?
Well, funny you should say that. Yeah, I was always intrigued by the Doom Patrol, but didn't really read a lot about the Doom Patrol, so I was still a little bit new to the characters when I watched the show, but I knew we were going to get something weird and quirky, and we got all that plus more. And we got stuff that was gross, horrific, funny. It kind of just covers the gamut of emotion watching this show. And so that's kind of one reason I love it so much, and also love that the characters, the show doesn't have a bad effects budget, but they also take the time to develop the characters, so it's not always one thing or the other. You're not 2 people in a room all day, all episode, or a giant spider every 5 minutes, so it balances it out pretty well. Robot Man went from not sure about him. I think he's my favorite now because his anger is a big part of him, but also he provides a lot of humor through that as well. So, and he's probably the more I don't know if him or Jane is the more potty mouth character, but
this entire season was potty mouth from beginning to end, and there was potty on screen ghost action too. So, Marks or Kelly, did you have any thoughts on this? Because Marks already spoke up. Did you have any more?
I thought Dorothy would be a big center of it all in season 2. So, and I thought,
right.
Yeah, and I liked her a lot. Also, I was always going no, I hope they don't have to kill her at the end or something really sad, because I kind of like this actress and this character. And what I like too, I do miss Mr. Nobody, but I do like that we got other bad guys coming in and out, and they kind of broadened the world scope a little bit, and how weird it got, like Sex Men, for example. All looks like craziness. I really love that, and I think it also showed that it could survive without a narrator. So,
yeah. This is exactly the kind of thing HBO Max and DC Universe, you couldn't do this on the CW. This is a very R-rated thing.
hard R on some
Just-
of the issues.
Just Robot Man's
I wouldn't
dialogue.
want to watch with my mom or any children in the room.
Yeah, no question. I mean, in some ways, that actually, one of the things that strikes me is this feels like a very personal show to Greg Berlanti. And, like he really addresses things that matter to him, who he's thought about. He shows, he lets his writers show their Finnish side with the sex men and things like that, because you can definitely tell their homage piece too. And different things like that. I mean, in some ways, I think this is, they get to be unleashed a little bit. That's why it goes into that R rating. So.
Right. And so, and then the thing that I just echo what a couple other people said, I really was expecting Mr. Nobody. Then just from reading press beforehand, I knew that he really wasn't going to be in the show at all. But I do think that it suffered a little bit from not having that fourth wall breaking, Mr. Nobody making fun of the show as it went along, like it did on the first season, where he's like, "Oh no, not more character building. Get to the real stuff." So I thought that was kind of funny, even though I love the character building probably the most about the show. But if you look at the entire season, there were 9 episodes compared to the previous season, which had a few more. A lot of it had to do with the quarantine and the COVID situation. It was supposed to be 10 episodes. And this 10th episode had one more scene, supposedly, that needed one more pivotal scene that needed to be shot. And they couldn't get to it. So they kind of did a supernatural thing where, if you know what that means, the TV series Supernatural, there were a handful of episodes that they didn't get to, and they just figured, we'll just carry it over to the next year. So according to my understanding, the 10th episode, part of it was cannibalized to give the 9th episode, the final episode of this season, a more of a impactful cliffhanger. But it was originally, the 9th episode was always supposed to be a 2-parter cliffhanger that was supposed to culminate into the 10th episode. And then the 10th episode was supposed to tease the 3rd season. So instead, we just got the 9th episode cliffhanger with a little extra meat on the bone. But some people were just like, unsatisfying. Other people just think it's great because they're just like biting, at the reins to get to the 3rd season. But so if you felt like that 9th episode wasn't full enough for a season finale, that's because it's not really the season finale.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot
of the subplots suffered. They did. They cannibalized. I was earlier today reading an article from interviewing the creators, and they were saying that they were pretty happy with the 9th episode, with the results of the 9th episode, because there were some things that they wanted to add in, details of the Candlemaker background and some of the stuff that they had with the reveal about Miranda not being Miranda. They had a couple of other things that were like hinting toward that, and that you were going into the 10th episode, you were going to sort of have an idea that that's what they were going to reveal. But I think ultimately also, Vic and Rita's subplots suffered a lot too, because they kind of got dropped altogether in the 9th episode. They just didn't have the time. I'm sure that was not the case for the original plan, but when they were, kind of just putting those together and smushing them and just making sure that there was a proper finale with what they were able to do. That's unfortunately, that's what happened, is that a couple of the subplots did get dropped, and we may hopefully there's a season 3 and we can maybe there will be 11 episodes. That would be amazing. So but yeah, that's unfortunate that we didn't get to see some of the stuff that we were hoping to see in the finale play out.
Yeah. I'm okay with it as long as there's a season 3. Otherwise I'd be very unhappy.
It'd be like
they haven't officially announced it, right?
No.
Season 3. Yeah, if the viewership is up, I would think that would hopefully that means they will get one.
Tell your friends.
Yeah,
Seriously, that's what I've been doing. I have been telling all my friends, and even friends who don't even like live action superhero shows. Like I've been, just telling them, just watch the show. It's amazing. It's funny. You're going to love the characters. You're going to fall in love with them. They have these great coverages of all these different contemporary issues that are really heartfelt and really evocative. I mean, I've been, spreading. If it doesn't get a season 3, it's not going to be on me. That's all I'm saying, because I have been telling everybody I know to watch, and some of them have actually started watching it my best friend is not a person who watches Kate Media, as they call it. She's not really a big fan of like live action, and she started watching it, and she loves the show. I mean, loves it. She's like cosplaying Jane for 2021. She loves the show. So I mean, tell even your friends that aren't. If you want the show picked up, you gotta spread the word.
And one of the good things about it being a streaming media outlet is that they actually count every single person who watches the show. If you watch it multiply, and they even check what parts of the show you stop, rewind, and rewatch, because they use that in their algorithms to figure out what to program in other shows, and also whether or not to renew this show. So it's not like you have to be a Nielsen family. If you watch the show, HBO Max knows about it. DC Universe knew about it. So
it's just the access is not as broad as it used to be. I mean, it is and it isn't. You know, because you got to pay for HBO Max. So.
Right. Yeah,
I think the future of the show heavily depends too on what HBO decides to do with the DC, the universe shows. I mean, they're investing a lot of money, resources into Harley Quinn, and but obviously animated series are a lot less expensive, and in the era of COVID, logistically they're easier to put on.
And you have some named actors in Doom Patrol, even if they're not physically there. Matt Bomer and Brendan Fraser occasionally, but mostly they're not there. So that affects budget a lot too.
For sure. Yeah, isn't it like there's like 3 different people who play Larry Trainor? There's like 3 different guys.
One actor, but in the physicality part of it. But
Matt Bomer does the voice for Larry in Titans, but it's a completely different actor in the.
I don't know. I was not super happy with the finale, partially for a lot of the reasons. I had actually reached out and I was like confused, and partially it was probably because it was the Well, partially, I guess I was waiting for the 10th because I didn't do a lot of surfing to see whether or not there was, but I knew there had been 10 episodes last year. So I was like, wait, we're done. So,
there were 15 episodes last year.
Oh, there were? I thought it was 10. Okay.
Yeah, they were cutting out 5 episodes to make it a 10 episode season because the new corporate overlord of DC decided AT&T decided they needed to cut money, and so they just cut everything down to 10 episodes, and which isn't bad. It just cuts out a lot of the. It cuts out a lot of.
Be the favorite number nowadays. So.
Yeah, it's also a lot. If you care about getting from point A to point B as efficiently as possible, 10 episodes does it without filler episodes, which are kind of the episodes most people really like who are fans, because it talks about those are the episodes where you get the background stories of the characters, where each we wouldn't have a Danny Patrol episode in a 10 episode arc because that's just an offshoot, and we wouldn't have had that beautiful scene. Well, the funny thing with Matt Bomer singing that ends with him going, "But I don't sing," so you realize it was just this really sad episode from the first season that would have never happened in the second season, and it kind of didn't. What we got were these little vignettes of when they did the homages to the 1970s cop films or the shows.
Love those though.
Those were great.
That's episode 5, which was kind of amazing, where you had Robot Man fantasizing about him being a cop.
Steel and Stone, and
which was kind of great. And then you had the same thing when you had what's her name? Elastigirl.
Yeah. It's not like
blob lady, but Elastigirl's her actual real name, but she's known as Rita or the Blob, where she was fantasizing about being in Avengers, which is kind of cool. That 1960s really mod type of thing. Those were like the 2 highlights to me this year that were beyond the actual plot, but nothing really stood out like an entire beautiful episode. This season as did last season. I think it's because they had to cut so many episodes down, in my opinion.
Yeah, Danny Patrol is the episode that I tell all my friends going into it, wait for that episode, because that's the magic. You see the magic there.
Although I did cry when the brick broke, I have to admit.
Oh yeah, when Dorothy's just heartbroken.
Yeah.
I'm weirdly invested in the future of Danny the Street because, like, that Danny the Street, their story is the one that I was actually them and Larry's stories were the ones from the comics that I was most familiar with, just because Danny eventually becomes Danny the World and becomes their own universe, and they just sort of travel through dimensions. I kind of want to see that for them. You know, they
now it's on the party. You know,
I would have joined the Danny's Ends. I would have been like, bye bye. I'm in Danny's End now. That's what I would have done. I just, sorry. Sorry, world. That's what I would do. But then another thing that struck me this year, which is a lot different than last year, is actually it's a lot similar to last year. Is that Cyborg had like the backwards story arc that everybody else had? Because the first season, everybody was dealing with regrets from their past. It's like they were ghosts that needed to deal with the last remaining regret before they could move on to the light or whatever. It really felt like that type of theme, whereas Cyborg was dealing with daddy issues, and it kind of flipped this season where everybody was dealing with parental issues except for Cyborg, who was dealing with moving on, being a grown-up and having a relationship. So again, Cyborg didn't fit in with everybody else very well, which is kind of frustrating. But I guess it was a palate cleanser from the rest of the thing. I don't know why writers would do that, but I think that would be the only thing I could think of, is to make him be the misfit in this for the stories this
misfit
year.
Within the band of misfits. That's
yeah. Yeah, and I will say that I thought the whole that was the weakest storyline for me this year.
Yeah.
Which then I've always felt Cyborg is an odd fit, honestly.
Yeah.
Because of course Beast Boy is from Doom Patrol, but they took him off for the Titans, where Cyborg was from the Titans. And
I never understood why there's a Titan show, but Cyborg is on Doom Patrol.
Yeah, I know.
Someone made that decision. I don't know.
He seems to always want Cyborg somewhere besides Justice League or somewhere else.
He's a good token character, unfortunately.
Yeah,
we have one of our viewers talking about HBO Max and potty mouthness. If you want to bring up that one, the last episode, the last comment.
Yes.
Oh, Donna, you didn't even bring up the ghosts.
That still showed up all through the rest.
Yeah, you're never gonna get that haunting out of there.
So like in episode 4 I think it was episode 4. Yeah, where they had the Danny's Ends, so the Danny resurrection episode. They want to know what Danny was going to be, and it turned out that there's two things going on. One is you had the Flex doing his poses to get Rita to get over her hump. That's bad, David. Get over her blockage. And then it caused, combined with other things going on, we ended up having sex ghosts showing up and almost bringing upon the end of the world, of course, because that's what sex ghosts do. But they're in the final episode. They're like throughout in the background. Sometimes they're obvious. Other times there's this faint blue glow. Don't look too close. But so the sex ghost kind of freaked me out a little bit. It was just it was funny, but then again, it's one of those things that you don't want to watch with a kid.
I thought it was kind of dumb. I gotta be honest.
It seemed an odd choice,
but the humor. I don't even think I'd call that adult humor. I'd call that 12-year-old humor.
You don't want to watch a Sex-Men spinoff?
Be careful what you wish for.
No, the Sex-Men are beautiful. Don't cross the streams. But those are
goofy. They're not afraid to be goofy and ridiculous. And
making fun of both of those franchises was freaking hilarious. But the ghosts, no.
Hey, we had a roach last year, so I guess we have sex ghosts this year.
Well, yeah, that's right. We started with the donkey, where they were vomited forth. They didn't show them going end to end, but the reverse. But yeah, that was kind of the ghosts where I was laughing, but then again, I was watching it by myself. But I just imagine having my mother-in-law in the room with us, a 75-year-old woman.
I watch the show with my son, but he's an adult. He's a young adult, but I watch it, and we're just like, oh gosh, it's just. But I mean, it's funny. It's funny, but it's goofy. And I mean, I don't think this show has gotten any more adult. I don't think that. I think they have embraced that Cliff, in universe gets called out for his potty mouth, his swearing. So they've. I mean, that's a way of making that fourth wall breakage, maybe like a little homage to how they had a little bit of it. I missed that too. I missed the narrating, because for me, in the first season, when we had Mr. Nobody breaking the fourth wall and chit-chatting with us, everything he said was so wrong and terrible and just awful, and completely off base. It was almost like he was a foil for the audience, not just a foil for the characters. So I thought that was really cool and fun about the first season, is that Mr. Nobody was like, we were almost part of what he was there being.
Yeah,
against.
like when you watch a horror movie and you're like, don't go into the woods, kind of vibe to it,
Yeah. I feel like
but they
more
have little character moments where the characters do break that fourth wall in the second.
It was nice having him, particularly to point out the cheesy bits as cheesy bits, which was kind of nice, because it helps. It's like, okay, we're in on it with you. We realize it, and this is a joke. This is the way this show works. And he was talking about. He's even saying, "Well, you need to catch out of the recap, because I'm not going to explain that to you now," which I thought was hilarious from the second to last episode last year. But this year, it kind of missed. I kind of really missed that. But this year, it really took a different tone, because last year was a grand arc. Every episode, even the character building episodes, led to the grand arc of what was going on. This year, there were a couple Monsters of the Week episodes, which was interesting. So I think that they were trying to find their sea legs. Like if this is going to last, we need to figure out what type of show we're going to be. And that felt interesting. I think it was kind of fun, because it, for somebody who lives in Silicon Valley, it felt like they're kind of beta testing some concepts of where they wanted to go with the show. But it also felt a little unpolished, which I didn't hate, but it just didn't feel like a continuation of the first season, which is a negative. But on the positive, we got the full story, basically, of Dorothy, which was kind of cool for me.
I like the idiot. You suck out the idiot from the scans.
I thought one of the more frightening monsters was Red Jack, who was extremely disturbing, looked like Guillermo del Toro character mixed with Pinhead. So they were, they could genuinely frighten you if they wanted to, and with this show too.
Yeah, as opposed to the terrifying time guy.
Right. All right, and thinking about that, like, there's so much of this where you think this could easily be Tim Burton or Guillermo del Toro. You can tell they're inspired by these quirkier directors with this show too.
Now, I will say I did like Ronnie and Vic's story, and I didn't necessarily feel that it was totally out of place in the season early on, especially just because there was a lot of in season 2 of them thinking about their futures. A lot of them are like, now that they've all realized what's happened, to their lives and how Chief was responsible for it. And now we have, Cliff with his daughter and forging a new relationship with his grandchild and his daughter and his daughter's wife and all this other stuff. And now you have, Jane seeking to, prove herself as someone who's worthy to lead the team, the underground in the future. So you have all these, larger thematic elements. And I think that for Vic and Ronnie, for me, that resonated really well early on. But I mean, they definitely did drop the thread, like we were talking about earlier, that they just didn't get a chance to explore it. And, for me, Vic has always been that thread to the larger DC universe for Doom Patrol. Otherwise, it would feel very standalone for me. But with Vic there and with the continual, hey, aren't you part of the Justice League? And, those little shout outs, universe shout outs. And now finding out that, Ronnie's what happened to her was responsible. Star Labs was responsible. So I liked that they had those two characters there, because they were definitely anchors, for the larger DC universe at large. But I did feel like their struggle together and individually to move forward, with all their trauma and all, just start envisioning a future together. That definitely was something that a thread that ran for all of them. Like for Rita, thinking about her future, as an actress with this chronic, illness, I guess. She is kind of an analogy for chronic illness. I mean, the actress has talked about people going up to her saying that they feel like, her trying to struggle to deal with her blob, out of control blobness. I don't know what you would call it, but a lot of people, take that as an analogy for dealing with chronic illnesses and stuff like that. And so she's starting to, understand that she does have a future, and like you just saw this throughout all the characters. For me, I thought they fit in that way, and I would have liked to have seen a little better wrapped up for that, but hopefully season 3.
I've been hoping that they will explore like it's the Brotherhood of Evil, right? Make sure I got that name right. Because they've teased them that they existed in the past, and I'm hoping maybe they'll bring them back at some point. Once these heroes are hero enough, I guess, because they're still like working through it.
Yeah,
so I kind of want.
Nobody was fired from the Brotherhood.
Yeah, I hate when it happens.
And then they brought in his robot that last season. We're talking about first season again. So, but the thing that I really liked the cyborg love story. I just really think it was, for me, I would have liked it as its own series, because it didn't him dealing with his dad and dealing with Star Lab stuff in a way that's not part of the Arrowverse, which would have been really kind of cool. But I see what you're saying, Andy, about the echoing, the moving forward with your life that every other character was also dealing with this season. I think that does tie it in a lot of it. So I'm coming over to your side.
My writer speculation would be that she ends up joining the Brotherhood of Evil or something like that. So I'm almost wondering if they're setting something like that up for her. Probably not. She probably just died.
I did like in her story the fact that when we first meet her, she seems so normal. Like, yes, she's dealing with her trauma, but she's putting it together, and and she's very honest, and she's like, you need to be honest, and she seems more. And then of course, as things happen, we realize she's not so together, and And to me, one of the things that I saw a lot this season, it was a lot of foils. We had, we saw Cliff's family and kind of how they worked. Just that was to me a big thing, just seeing, how this one is and that one, and just kind of matching up storylines along those lines. But that's been true for a lot of Doom Patrol, honestly.
Oh, we have another comment. Facebook user, random, unknown, anonymous person asking the question that we did address earlier, but we'll address it again in a specifically to this. Answer is unknown, but if there's not one, at least there's going to be 5 people here that may be rioting a little bit because we want to know what happens, because episode 10 never aired, which was supposed to be the second half of what ended up being this series. The season ender this year. So,
and I won't say it's never aired. It's not going to air. It won't exist.
Well, they may again cannibalize it to be part of the first episode of the third season. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Jane's story.
Who cares what happened to Dorothy? Move on.
I know that HBO Max is working on a Green Lantern show, but that could be a ways off. So I think maybe just to keep the DC fans happy, to keep something live action on HBO Max.
They're moving Titans over.
Reason.
Season 3 is Titans will be on HBO Max.
And Titans, yeah.
If there is a season 3, I think it'll be a while. It'll be a pretty long.
Yeah, I think it'll be a while for a lot of these shows. Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me is that article that I was reading with the interviews with the creators is they actually feel that the 9th episode of the second season, if they don't get a season 3, they actually feel that that's a pretty good place to end the series. They were like, well, if we want a season 3, but if we don't, we feel that it the loose ends it leaves is something that you can maybe figure out on your own, or it leaves it enough to, like Dorothy's story where she goes into confront her literal demons, and likewise with the reveal of who Miranda really was, and all this stuff. So I mean, I don't know if I would, as a fan who wants to see like 6 more seasons of this show. I don't know if I would agree with that, but I do understand where they're coming from. Is that if this is all we get, that they've really created a very full story, and whatever loose ends are left are things that maybe we could possibly draw our own conclusions if necessary.
I think this is. I would hate for this to be the season finale, and it sounds like it's a PR kind of thing to say.
Yeah,
I think so.
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously we're going to hate it because there's like of the 5 of us, we actually have watched every episode, and so we're like kind of invested in the show and we're willing to do a panel on it. But if you look at it, let's say that just because of COVID and other issues, it's just not going to work. The thing I would be thankful for that this series even existed is it really introduced us to, aside from the rabid comic reading groups, introduced a good group of people that a lot of us have never heard of before. With the Larry Trainer, you have Elastigirl, you have Cliff, you've got Crazy Jane, who's probably one of the most interesting characters that we've had on TV at all in the past couple of years. So that alone is a reason to watch the show. And of course, it's got the huge draw for misfit type groups who are traditionally left behind by society. And also there's a lot of women's issues that are brought up without actually being SJW-ish. They deal with things in a non-preachy, realistic example type of way to show what's going on, which I thought was kind of nice. So just having the show exist with only 24 episodes, if it did end with the season, which it hopefully will not, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. Without the with all the flashbacks and the fact that these characters have lived so long at the same time as talking about current issues, it feels like it doesn't really exist in a certain time,
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that I really like about the potential of this show is the potential to create its own universe. I know that Titans takes place in the multiverse because of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the crossover from the Arrowverse last year. But at the same time, it's shown potential to create a DC TV universe that is separate and distinct from the Arrowverse. And one of the things that made me think about that was this season's introduction of Negative Woman. And the last time we've seen Negative Woman in live action was in the first season of Legends of Tomorrow. And she was barely recognizable. As someone that's one of the characters I was most familiar with, is she was barely recognizable in Legend. I'm a fan of Legends of Tomorrow, but if she hadn't been called that in the credits, I would have never guessed that was supposed to be Valentina Vostok, because she just had no resemblance to the. But this one managed to update her and still, just have really deep roots in the character from the comic books, and I really love that entire subplot and how Larry got to imagine his own future and what was possible with the entity and all this stuff. And I just thought her as a character, I thought that was a very good taste of what could be possible with the show, because they are able to bring in all these different characters that are not necessarily currently mainstream among audiences that aren't hardcore comic book people.
Yeah.
That episode felt weird, though, to me. I don't know. It's just the whole 60s spaceship.
Because those two space guys kept like playing tag and stuff.
I felt bad for them. I was like,
what's going on?
It was like,
you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's true for this show, but I wanted to say the creepiest moment this season was, as well, not Jane, but Jane was being lowered into the well, and that whole sequence with her and her father. Oh my God. I was just like,
don't you drop the stuffed animal in there?
Yeah. I was just like, I wanted to hurt that guy. So it's like, and then, Jane confronting, going to the farm to try to find the stuffed animal. And
to me, the creepiest part was the orgy thing that was going on, and Jane dealing with that and having her dad show up. And it was just like, I almost like turn off the TV. I can't even deal with that. That it was just the way they dealt with sexual abuse, which was heavily implied in the first season. It's not heavily implied; it's graphically kind of implied nastiness in the second season, and they don't shy away from it. They also don't shy away from the fact that you don't move on from that kind of trauma. And the fact they had the trauma, the trauma group, the therapy group, I thought was kind of interesting. I really liked that because this was it really dealt with the entire season was dealing with past trauma and trying to move on from that, which does tie into Cyborg and everybody else's story arcs this season.
Yeah, that was definitely Larry and Cliff, everybody. That was kind of what it was.
Yeah, I was really impressed with they got so deep into the characters in season 1. It was like, where do they go from here? But they were able to dig deeper in season 2.
Yeah,
definitely, and in some unexpected ways, they made some. They really did not shy away from, like with Larry Traynor, showing how much of a horrible person he was to his children.
And he owned up. Well, he mostly owned up to it, and he realized that. Yeah.
So it was because I think in the first season he was kind of like the one that people were pulling for him, and possibly Rita were the ones that people were pulling for the most. And this season, Rita really came in as the glue that holds everybody together, and Larry, they really explored his a-holeness to his children, how much of he damaged his sons by being too demanding and kind of neglective and not there because he's dealing with his own turmoil. He didn't have enough time to actually be a dad. And I thought that was kind of honest, and how grudges are held. Even though somebody loves you, they can still hold a grudge against you and hate you at the same time. I thought that was an interesting thing, the way his surviving son dealt with the issue. Here's a hug. Now I'm going to call the feds on you.
Yeah.
That for me, that storyline was a very interesting and very subtly and nuanced exploration of what it means to feel forced to perform masculinity when you don't necessarily identify with everything that goes with that in society. And so I think that for me, I saw a lot of overcompensation, and there was almost out of character the first time I saw. And Larry is such a chill and laid back person that he has sort of like been roped into helping a lot of different people. And it was so out of character to see, and especially after seeing so many scenes of him being so gentle with John and and all these other things, and just having him be like such a jerk to this little child that was trying to get his approval, and especially overlapped with some of the scenes with his own family, and how his mother he overheard his mother discussing him when he was a child, discussing how he had certain traits that kind of gave him away as not being heterosexual back then, or not performing masculinity adequately and what have you. And so that for me, that was a very well drawn story about what people who are violently forced to perform things, aspects of sexuality and gender that they don't necessarily, identify with, or that isn't part of who they really are, and how damaging that can be intergenerationally as well as individually. I thought that was just a really well drawn, even though I didn't like him very much when he was young, his little boy. I understood where he was coming from.
You bringing that up actually made me think of, that really is a theme that we haven't talked about, which I really didn't think about until just now listening to you, is that inappropriate sexuality or inappropriate sex situations was just all over this in season, including the sex ghosts. Inappropriate, it was there. It's like how you deal with that stuff. It was kind of interesting. So that was really in almost every episode, if not every episode this year, which is kind of odd. Now that I think about it, I was like,
Well, and even not necessarily inappropriate with Dot, but that realization, because that was the coming of age, and are you grown up, and that even was part of that storyline, even though it wasn't quite the same, but it still has that kind of tone to it.
Well, like the awkward sex, even Dorothy getting her first period. It's like awkward embarrassing sex was like it was everywhere, even and that was kind of odd how they did that. And part of me hates it when they make it okay. Now you have had your first menses, and you are now a woman. I'm just thank God they didn't make her pregnant by the end of it, which would have made me hate the show.
I gotta say,
they do that to almost every female lead character. They make her pregnant, and I was like, okay, women are more than just their uterus. Think about it.
I have to give a shout out to that woman in that quick shop place, though. Is it so cliche to have something like that happen and then them be mocked essentially? And I was like, wow, this is like a supportive character just thrown in there. And I was like, that was so amazing to do that. I love that.
And how Dorothy was so used to a harsh world that she thought she had to pay. She offered $20 for, like a bathroom stall, maxi pad. So it was just amazing. And then her the way she kind of melted when she realized that there were actually kind people who weren't making fun of her out there. I thought that was like the closest I had to the tears moment that I had from the first season. It was just beautiful.
He's a very affecting character. There was a lot of, now that you mention it, there was a lot of discussion about, getting in touch with your sexuality. That was something that, in a variety of ways, gender and sexuality throughout the series, and the scenes with the flashback scenes with Miranda and her awful boyfriend. That after she spent 3 weeks decorating an apartment, he threw an orgy without telling her, expected her to play along, and then acted like she was uncool. So there was this whole nature of coercion. Themes that were happening in that. I thought that was a super, super interesting.
He's like, I thought this could make us closer together. Bullshit. I'm sorry. Bull crap. Bull crap. You just wanted, and she called him on it, which was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. That actually, for me, was probably my favorite scene of the entire series. Season, and not just because of what she says, but also there is I think I timed it about a 16 or 17 second scene where Diane Guerrero goes through about 4 different characters, just rapid succession switching, and you can identify every single one. She is just phenomenal that way, and it's literally less than 20-second scene, and she cycles through them all, and she has like 3 words per, and one of them doesn't get a word at all, and you can just tell at least 4 different alters. It's just, for me, I've had to watch that scene like a couple of times just because the acting that went into that is just, I have never seen anything like that before.
It was
you mentioned Dorothy, and I just wanted to say, whoever the casting director is who found Abigail Shapiro, because she was such a great actress, I had to look and say, is this really a kid? She's actually like 20 years old, and short. But in any case, she was terrific in that role, because that couldn't be an easy one to cast.
That voice, the singing voice, was good too. I don't know if that was her voice or not, but that was good when she was singing.
Probably was. She does a lot of stage. So,
but to go back to the I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the orgy, of course. But,
when in doubt, just go back to the orgy.
There were so many of them.
it showed the weakness of the Miranda character, the peacemaker, who, as long as something didn't sound horribly illogical, she tried to make it work. And so she was manipulated by the manipulative boyfriend into doing something she didn't want to do with her body. And then you had to have Jane, who is not trustworthy, and come out and basically call him for what it is. She's the one who will, without beating your head physically, she'll beat you up verbally occasionally to call you out for your faults. So I thought that was very masterfully done, and a very awkward and otherwise icky episode. But I almost forgive them.
It was Tracy Jane's origin story, that personality's origin story, right? Because that's when she became Prime. And
Yep.
Well, and that's one of the neat things too, because I have a bit of a psych background, and that whole multiple personality thing is they arise when others can't compensate, and you saw so many of them, as you say, the origin of so many of them this season, where they came from. We got more about Miranda, we got more about Jane, understanding where some of those things came from and rose out of the whole thing. And it was cool to see. But yeah, her performance, how she really does have all those personalities, very distinct. And they still translate when they go into the underground, and you see those characters. And of course, none of them look like her because they're not. But that the personalities still come through. So they must really talk to them all. And it can't just be the writers, too.
Yeah. It's remind you a lot of iZombie and Orphan Black, the actresses that can play multiple characters in an episode.
Yeah. My biggest emotional moment, like my biggest, oh my gosh, can't wait to watch the next episode, was whenever we had the fight off between Dorothy and Crazy Jane's, personalities, imaginary friends, and then they start killing each other off. I'm like, whoa! It just went to another level there, because I was like, I can't believe they actually killed off some of these, beings. Unfortunately, the bear creature was worthless in the fight.
Oh, I love the bear.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
god!
I believe that Crazy Jane, or Jane, I think they don't call her Crazy Jane in the comics anymore. I think they just call her Jane. But I think that Jane in the comics, I think she's the only DC character that has dissociative identity disorder. I know there's several in Marvel. There's Moon Knight and there's Legion, and then we have the character from Split, which I guess is like a comic book adjacent. There's other characters, but I believe. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe she's the only DC character, DC Comics character that has. And I think that they drew that really well. And certainly they had to have discussed, all the actresses must have discussed, because even some of the body language and some of the tics that they have, and it's seamless. Like you can just see, even if they look nothing like her, you can see where
we're all using some of those things. Yeah, Hammerhead, everything. Yeah.
Yes, I love Hammerhead.
I think probably the most traumatic that wasn't the dad sex thing for me was when they killed off Baby Doll. Because when that happened, I remember I was watching that. I was kind of, my husband's a bigger fan of the show than I am. And so when he was watching it, and I was kind of in the background watching it, then I rewatched it after he did. So that scene came on, and that happened. And he and I both looked at each other like, they actually killed off the most lovable of the bunch of the personalities. And I was like, oh my God, hopefully, did she die? That whole bit. And then it goes to black. And it's like, thank God it was just like, wait a week for the next episode.
I do think she died. I think that we're never going to see Flaming Katie. And I think they're dead.
I want to know what happens when they go to the well. I mean, do they integrate? Are they just gone? Are they out of the Kay's personality?
So this was how I took the finale. This is how you guys feel free to chime in if you have different. This is how I interpreted what happened in the finale. I think that her altar, the altar that is actually Miranda, is actually named Daddy, and this is from the comic books. This is actually. She has this character, which I think is called an introjection. It's the opposite of a projection. So she has manifested within her psyche this idea of what her father was, and her father's persona within her own system, within the underground. And I think that's who that is. I think that's who it was. And I think that persona is actually trying to kill off all of the other altars. I think that's their goal. It's the embodiment of destruction for Kay and her altars. And ultimately, if we probably see going forward, there probably will be some kind of underground war between all of the. Eventually, they're going to catch on. Other altars, or some of them are really brilliant, and there's going to start to catch on, and there might be some of the more self-destructive ones who side with the Daddy altar, some of the ones who may have, suicidal ideations, which we also have seen from some of the altars. So I think that's where that's going, is that this persona rather, is a manifestation of some internalization of the destruction of the person that is Kay. I don't know if I'm making. I don't have a psych background, so maybe.
Well, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain lot of evidence that abused people in general, not just children, will often connect with their abuser. I mean, that's pretty well known. But of course, one of the ways of dealing with I didn't even want to go into the dissociative identity stuff, but is the integration of personalities, which is essentially destroying the other personalities. And it could be that she's identifying with the dad or trying to do that, or it could be that she thinks she's benefiting Kay by coming down towards one personality. But I do think that's going to be one of the big arcs coming up in the next season. Definitely.
It does reflect. There was an earlier episode where Cliff said that he had already turned into his dad, and so that there's a foreshadowing there of that also affecting Jane.
I hadn't caught that. That's cool.
I think the sudden shock of the deaths weakened her psyche, and that's what let this thing raise up from the well and pretend, and it's probably her dad. Didn't he say something like little girl or something like that? That was a reference to the father. So, like at the very end when Miranda revealed she's not Miranda.
Yep. Yeah. So
allegedly there were Easter eggs through the whole season that gave away that it was the daddy persona, and I have seen the season twice now, and I could not pick them out. So maybe you guys picked out some hints of that. Maybe
I just re-binged it this Friday and Saturday. And so, no, I didn't see. I was just more into finding other things that I didn't see in other storylines because I'm more interested in okay, let's go to Larry. Enough of this cyborg crap. The cyborg's like, oh, this is such a good arc. What's going on with Cyborg and his girlfriend and that whole sub thing? This could be its own series. And so I wasn't seeing Easter eggs at all. The one thing that left me, two things that I didn't like about how it ended so abruptly. I really wanted to know more about the Candlemaker. I'm assuming that's what the 10th episode was the big bad. Which Candlemaker is such the big bad, and then the second one was the setting up of the next big dad, which is probably the Jane's father for season 3. That's just obvious that's what it should be, just from somebody who's edits writer. So that's what it should be, but it didn't happen, and I just feel like I had a 3-course dinner with only 2 courses.
I do think you could end up combining the two. I mean, they have had multiple villains, and since Alter Dad is kind of like the kind of a very metaphysical mental thing, and essentially Candlemaker is too, it's some kind of a manifestation within Dot. So I could see them and there's lots of daddy issues with Dot, so you could easily if I was a writer on the show, I would be like, yeah, let's end up combining this and making this into a whole arc.
That makes sense.
Well, I believe in the comic books, there's a different explanation for the Candlemaker. I don't know if they're going to go there or not, but there is something that they could say that it's something bigger or different. I don't know if I should say it, if it's a spoiler.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm pretty sure they say that it's not actually one of her personalities. It's just been hiding out, and it's really like some kind of demon that is using her abilities to manifest in our reality. So, which is, I wonder if that's hinting at like this, her mother, and probably this whole tribal thing has been them trying to protect the world from this demon, maybe. And maybe the overprotectionists of for 100 years of making her a little girl has not prepared her. So
she's not strong enough to face it and to battle him.
Yeah.
And it could be passed on from mother to daughter, this caretaker position. That would have been very cool for a mythos that would be built up around the Yukon folks.
That makes sense.
I'm really keeping you because I need to have a baby.
She gets pregnant and gives birth to the Candlemaker. And
she fits into her mother's shoes, literally goes onto her mother's shoes. So I think that kind of fits with what we saw, toward the end there. So maybe
he's keeping me as a pet. He's like, no, I'm keeping you as a sperm donor. Basically, that's how it felt to me. And so, from after watching that, but in reading, the thing the Marx did bring up is that the thought is the Candlemaker said, "Hey, there's a comfy place for me to hide out. I'll hide out in this little girl's imagination."
But then the show likes to use metaphors and use these as kind of dealing with them. Okay, yeah, I know we're getting close on time and everything, but. How do you see them using that kind of concept, since they like that, for the next season?
Well, is that how we were discussing about how they like to touch on these overarching themes in individual ways with the different characters? One of the things they didn't really draw out that fully, but they did have sort of a shared theme of fractured psyches. And with Larry and Negative Man and Rita and her trying on a bunch of different characters, literally, for her community theater and in her Avengers fantasy. And, there's this whole idea of like fractured psyches and reconciling your identities, your various hats that you wear into one big whole. Maybe that's where they're going with that. We have, that's the only real like loose, tenuous thread that ties the two, the Candlemaker and the Daddy persona together.
Well, it's inner demons, more literally. And so it's the sledgehammer thing, but I think that's probably because it's DC and they're kind of obvious in some of their stuff. So I also think that the inner demons is also like really obvious there. That goes with the fractured psyches.
Well, I thought maybe like some of the bad guys that they fought this season kind of fit that analogy of sort of these demonic type beings that feed off these core emotions or some elements. I thought maybe that's their way of like teasing that that the Candlemaker could be something like that, maybe
including the idiots.
Yeah, the idiots and
I forget what the little things are called.
Idiot that makes or something like that. I forget what they call it.
Like, the little pink guys. I forget what they're called. The Pepto-Bismol tankers.
Yeah.
Nasty.
Oompas, but horrible.
I'm hiding from them. That was beautiful.
That was funny.
We are getting close to our hour. Actually, we're over the hour. Henry, you brought up something, and one person wants to know. I'm sorry, this is off topic, but Henry brought it up, so I'm bringing it back on topic. One of our viewers wants to know who's going to play the Green Lantern.
Ryan Reynolds would be good. No. I'm going to guess not someone from Glee because they've done that a few times. I'm going to guess probably go with an unknown to the TV series, and they'll need a big star. So that's my guess.
Yeah,
which is nobody. Which I didn't really guess anything.
You're saying that nobody knows. It's not been cast. The show's not even for sure going forward.
Yeah, and I think we're not even sure if they're going to have Hal Jordan, Jon Stewart, which people will be in it. So
I hope they have Jon Stewart. I'm going to take a big swing and say Will Smith's going to Jon Stewart.
Jon Stewart.
I'm sure with the series we will meet all these characters. Just don't know who will be like the main characters. So.
That would be a better question: is which Green Lantern? I would say Jon Stewart. So if they're going to pick one,
I think.
Topic.
Yeah, like I said, I think all the Green Lanterns will eventually be in it since the series. It just depends on who will be the main one.
Right. But that was off topic, so I guess we're done for the season. Yeah. Anything that we missed before we wrap it up?
I just wanted to throw in. We didn't mention Timothy Dalton. I thought was really great this season as the Chief with his relationship with Dorothy.
Oh, his special appearance on the show.
Right.
Every episode is a main character.
His special appearance, but we saw another side of the Chief, and I thought he really delivered in this performance this year.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it'd been hard to accept him after finding out the truth if he didn't have Dorothy to kind of show us that softer side, probably.
Yeah, the whole stuff with him and Cliff. I mean, I love Tim Dalton, so that's never a question. But the way he was with Cliff is, it shows the Chief as being a little more multidimensional. Now, just like many things in this show, Star Labs itself has got good sides and bad sides within these.
And just overall, I kind of like I mentioned, like these characters are all very challenging, so the actors deserve a lot more credit, I think, for doing a great job. Having to act behind bandages and things, and I know it's not really Brendan Fraser. They do a voice. Anyway, they do a great job.
I think that actually the two actors that you just brought up, Matt Bomer and Brendan Fraser. Matt Bomer, who dealt with the issue of coming out as a lead TV series, coming out as a gay guy. So that was actually something in his real life that may have drawn him to the show. And also Brendan Fraser, who just came out in a different way as somebody who had to deal with the Me Too type thing. He was sexually assaulted trying to get jobs in Hollywood, and he eventually left because he couldn't deal with the PTSD of the scars that left on him.
Wow.
So that could have been, since that's such a big part of this series, that could have been one of the things that spoke to him. I would love to be able to ask him about that in a way that's not awkward.
Yeah, this show
Fingers
is.
crossed we'll see him at Dragon Con one of these
I
days.
hope so. Yeah, this was all filmed in Atlanta. A lot of folks that
Right.
are some of my friends that live in Atlanta that checked the show out, they were like, I know that mall, so it's, you can see little places around. Some of it was filmed in Lawrenceville too, I think. But yeah, my final thoughts on the show is that they've laid the groundwork for a lot of stories that are potential here, and not just within the show but without the show too. Just the way that they're tying in, the show has the potential to be the new heart of an entirely new DC TV universe. I've been watching the Arrowverse shows for almost a decade now, but this is a completely new direction, and it's funny, and you feel for everybody, and you're mad at everybody, and they're real people, and they deal with all kinds of issues in realistic and frank and evocative and just very authentic ways. And if we're going to get a season 3, as we were talking about earlier, you have to tell your friends if you like this show. You have to have they are counting every single viewer, and that's definitely going to play into a decision about whether they get a season 3, which they definitely deserve to have. That would be my final thoughts on it.
And whether you have DC Universe or HBO Max, either way you can watch it. I'm sure they count it either way. So
Yes.
Yeah.
I hope that if I was HBO, what I would so do is, because they know there's a lot of people who don't want to necessarily make that leap. And I wish they would kind of, after a certain period of time, 6 months or so, move it down to regular HBO. That way, you get a better feel for some of the reactions. And I think that would be a really good indicator for them. It's like, okay, you're paying value to see it, but then you let everyone else see it later on. And I think that would tell them a lot, because it would make a big difference to me. I hope they do that.
yeah. If I were running HBO, I think that would be smart to air some of these things on HBO Max. There's no downside to it. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think controversial statement. I watch all the DC shows. This is really my favorite of them all because it's just so different than the rest.
Mine too.
And I really think they should definitely keep it going, because they don't have a lot of new genre stuff on HBO Max, at least not yet, until Green Lantern and Titans move over.
Right.
I think they should definitely bring it back for another season. And I think they should add a few more episodes, actually.
And for those of you who like the show and are only really familiar with Arrowverse and not familiar with DC or HBO Max shows, and this may be your first show, Stargirl, which is on CW, actually has a similar type of production value, and actually sometimes better production value, and it's not part of the Arrowverse. And then also you might want to check out Titans, which we bring up a lot. And is there anything else that's live action that was on DCU that people should check out?
There was Swamp Thing. That last
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But I think that's dead.
It is.
It actually is a lot better than the buzz was on that show. And CW this fall. It's going to be
it was like an instant cancellation. I don't know. I still don't know what happened.
I think there were creative conflicts and stuff.
That's what I heard too. So
right, and I thought it was just going to be horribly trashy bad, and it's not. It's a pretty good show. But if you're watching it on CW this fall, it was canceled, and so all you're going to get is the few episodes that show on CW. There's no more after that, but it's good and it's worth watching. Just think of it as a mini series.
I think HBO is going to try to do what the new Marvel television is doing. DC is Disney has been pushing that whole side of things. I think unless HBO gets seriously stupid, that's what they will be doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there was a lot of talk at the DC fandom about when they talked about the Flash movie and how this will open up all these worlds, and I think that's the long-term plan, is to use Flash to, like they did with CW, to open up the world.
Who would you like to see cross over Doom Patrol? That would be interesting. Especially with all the F-bombs. It's like Titans is the only one that rating-wise could do it.
The Legends of Tomorrow with Doom Patrol might be fun.
Oh, yeah. Legends of Tomorrow. They're
Bebo!
I want to see Cliff knock out Bebo.
For me,
original.
one big disappointment for me, probably the biggest disappointment for me, as a fan of, I'm a big villain fan, as Kelly knows, and I'm a big fan of the DC villains, and specifically my favorite Rogues Gallery is the Flash Rogues Gallery, which we never saw. We never saw really past a couple of episodes of Captain Cold and Heatwave, and then they got over to Legends of Tomorrow, where Captain Cold got killed off immediately, and then we have Heatwave has never gone back. So we never got to see, Mirror Master, and we never got to see Weather Wizard like all work together and things like that. I think those guys have a great potential to make a lot of trouble across a lot of different universes. I would love to see the Flash's Rogue Gallery in particular.
I would not be surprised if that's the long-term plan for a Flash movie too down the road.
Yes.
I wouldn't mind having them bring in, since it's another HBO property, since they do time travel flashbacks, go back to old classic Watchmen characters that are alluded to in the new HBO series, but actually show them in this series. I think that would be a great tie-in.
Yeah.
And they would also have another HBO property, and so cross-promote. I'm thinking marketing.
They've been trying to tie in Watchmen with DC Universe and Converse.
HBO should be watching this right now, and we'll get a lot of ideas.
Yes. You're welcome, HBO.
All right.
We are way over time.
Yes, we are definitely way over time. That's the freedom of streaming panels opposed to live com panels.
And another thing that's wonderful about this being streaming and also being archived is that if you were unable to comment while this is live, this is going to be also live on YouTube, and also it'll be a thread on the American Sci-Fi Media Facebook page. So we will be there commenting and answering questions that you have over the next few weeks.
And if any of our musings come true, we can go back to it and say, "See, I said that."
Or
That's if you want to do that.
But next Sunday we're going to do Endgame, the COVID results. So we're going to be looking at Marvel, all the things going on with Marvel, since we're doing DC this week. Next week we're going to be touching on the Marvel Universe and every Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ending and putting off of Black Widow and all the fun stuff on Disney Plus. So we're going to be talking about that stuff. So be here this time, an hour earlier, this time next week. And then, of course, we'll be touching on some of this fun stuff during DC Dragon Con's virtual weekend, when we're going to be all, there'll be recorded panels, there'll be live panels. So definitely check out all of our great content during actual Dragon Con weekend. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.